Chapter 5. Favoring the Marquis of Wei, judging hostage exchange, assisting Wei against Liu, Song mobilizes. When Duke Zhang of Zheng learned that Gong Sunhua was raising troops to invade, he summoned his ministers for counsel. Gongzilu advised, cut the grass but leave the roots so it may sprout again in spring. Gong Sunhua narrowly escaped death and now leans on the forces of Wei, claiming he marches to rescue his grandmother. In truth, the Marquis of Wei knows nothing of Huai's crime against Zhou. My humble suggestion is to send a carefully worded letter to Marquis Huan of Wei, laying out the facts. Once he sees the truth, he will withdraw his army and Gong Sunhua, left isolated, can be captured without a battle. Duke Zhang agreed and dispatched an envoy bearing his letter to Wei. Letter from Duke Zhang, signed with his childhood name, Su Sheng. Your Excellency, Marquis Huan of Wei, I, Su Sheng, prostrate myself and present this memorial. Our house has been torn apart by internal strife, kin slain by kin. Our shame is deep before neighboring states. Yet the fief of Jingxinj was not granted out of hostility. The true rebellion was incited by my uncle, Gong Sudan, abusing our mother's favor. Bound by loyalty to our ancestors and duty to the realm, I had no choice but to suppress him. As for my mother, Lady Zhang, fearing Duan's unchecked ambition, she withdrew to Ying, where I later welcomed her back to ensure her care. Now Gong Sunhua has betrayed his father's legacy and fled to a great state. Had your Excellency known his injustice, you would not have marched your army against us. I bear no offense toward Wei. I only ask that you help punish the true rebels, and that our friendly relations remain unharmed. My humble state will be forever grateful. Marquis Huan of Wei read the letter with pleasure and immediately ordered a withdrawal. Gong Sunhua, seeing his isolation and fearing for his life, retreated and was captured without resistance. Meanwhile, the states of Lu and Song, hearing of Wei's mobilization, also raised their armies in support. When Marquis Huan of Wei finished reading, he cried out in alarm, Gong Suduan's treachery has brought about his own ruin. In raising troops for Gong Sunhua, I have truly abetted rebellion. He at once sent envoys to recall all Wei forces. Before the messengers arrived, however, Gong Sunhua's army seized the defenseless city of Mian. Enraged, Duke Zhang of Zheng ordered Minister Gao Qimi to lead 200 chariots to contest Mian. By then, though, the Wei army had already withdrawn and Gong Sunhua's troops were isolated and outnumbered. Abandoning Mian, Hua fled back to Wei. Gongzilu pressed the advantage, pursuing him all the way to the Wei frontier. Marquis Huan summoned his court and asked for advice on defense. Gongzi Zhuayu stepped forward. When the flood comes, build up earth to dam it. When the enemy advances, raise your shields to meet them. Why hesitate? But Minister Shri Shi counseled, no, our own fault lies in having supported Gong Sunhua's rebellion. Since Duke Zhuang's letter has arrived, we should reply in writing, accept blame, and express our regret. No need for battle. Let us withdraw our troops. The Marquis agreed. He commissioned Shri Shi to draft and deliver this reply to Duke Zhang. Marquis Huan of Wei prostrates himself and respectfully presents this memorial to the virtuous Marquis of Zhou. I was misled by Gong Sunhua's words, believing that your state had slain his father and imprisoned his grandmother, leaving his nephew with no refuge. Thus I raised arms against you. Now, upon reading your letter, I fully recognize Gong Su Duan's rebellion in Jingchench. My remorse is beyond measure. This very day I will recall the troops from Mian. Should your excellency permit, I will bind Gong Sunhua and deliver him into your hands, that we may restore our former amity. I beg your consideration. Duke Zhang of Zheng read the response and declared, "Since Wei has acknowledged its fault, what more could I ask?" Upon hearing that Duke Zhang was preparing to attack Wei, Lady Jane grew fearful that Gong Sunhua might be killed, thus severing the final bloodline of Gong Sudan. She knelt before Duke Zhang and pleaded, "I beg you, in memory of our late father Duke Wu, spare his descendants' life." Moved by her appeal, and realizing that Gong Sunhua stood alone, lacking allies or power, Duke Zhang relented. He sent a letter to Marquis Huan of Wei, stating simply, "In thanks for withdrawing your forces, I offer peace and renewed friendship. Though Hua has sinned, he is the only surviving son of my rebellious brother. I beg you to let him remain in your state, that the Don line may continue." Simultaneously, he recalled Gao Qumie's army, ceasing further aggression. Thus, Gong Sunhua lived out his days in Wei, dying there in old age. But that is a tale for another time. When King Feng of Zhou noticed that Duke Zhang of Zheng had long been absent from court affairs, he happened to receive Mao Gongjifu in audience, finding his words agreeable and his presence reassuring. The king said, "The Marquis and his son have held power for years, yet have long neglected their duties to court. I now wish you to oversee matters on their behalf. You must not decline." But Ji Fu bowed deeply, replying, "If the Duke of Zheng has not come, surely affairs in his state must be pressing. Should I take his place, he would not only resent me, but resentment might fall upon your majesty as well. I dare not accept such an order." After respectfully declining multiple times, Ji Fu returned to his state. Little did the king know, Duke Zhang had placed agents in the Zhou capital, gathering court intelligence and relaying all news. So when he heard of King Ping's intent to entrust authority to Ji Fu, how could he remain unaware? He immediately set out in his carriage for Zhou. Upon completing his formal audience, Duke Zhang addressed the king. "Your Majesty's grace has long favored my family, allowing father and son to govern in succession. Yet I am unworthy of such high office. I now humbly return my noble rank and request to retire to my fief, so as to fulfill my duties with modesty." Startled, King Ping replied, "You've been absent so long I've grown anxious for your well-being. But now that you've returned, it's as if a fish has found water again. Why speak of retirement now?" Duke Zhang bowed again. "A rebellious brother has long troubled our state, and I have neglected my duties here. Now that affairs are mostly settled, I made haste to the capital. Along the way, I heard troubling whispers that your majesty might hand power to Minister Mao. Compared to him, my abilities are utterly lacking. How dare I cling to office, bringing offense to the throne?" King Feng, embarrassed by the mention of Mao Gong, flushed with shame, and replied reluctantly, "I have been separated from you for some time, and new affairs in Zhou detained you. I merely wished Minister Mao to handle matters briefly until your arrival. He refused repeatedly, and I have already permitted him to return home. Why do you still question my intentions?" Duke Zhong bowed again and said, "Affairs of state belong to the throne, not to any one noble. The power to appoint officials rests solely with the king. If Minister Mao is capable, then I ought to yield my position. Otherwise, the court might believe I cling greedily to power, blind to propriety. I beg your majesty's discernment." King Ping replied, "You and your father have rendered great service to the realm. For over 40 years, father and son have governed with harmony and diligence. If now you harbor doubts about me, how can I clear my name? If you truly believe my trust is lacking, I shall send my crown Prince Hu as a hostage to Zhou. What say you?" Startled, Duke Zhong bowed low, refusing. "The duty to serve or step down is mine alone. What precedent is there for a son of heaven to offer his own heir as hostage to his vassal? The world would see this as me coercing my sovereign. I deserve death for even hearing such words." King Ping countered, "Not so. You govern with distinction, and I would have the crown prince visit Zhou under the pretense of observing its customs. This will dispel all suspicion. But if you insist on declining, you place blame on me instead." Still, Duke Zhong refused, kneeling repeatedly. At this, the ministers stepped forward and advised, "If the king alone offers a hostage, he humbles the throne. If Zheng alone does, it implies guilt. The only way to resolve mutual doubt and preserve trust both ways is through reciprocal exchange of hostages." King Ping agreed, "So be it, excellent counsel." Accordingly, Duke Zhong sent his heir apparent Hu to Zhou as a hostage, then formally expressed gratitude. In return, Zhou's crown prince Hu was also sent to Zhou. The official historians later remarked on this exchange. Thus was the distinction between ruler and vassal utterly overturned. Verse: "Hearts and hands, born of one body, yet suspicion tears them apart. Hostages traded like market goods. From this day, the royal order falls to decline." After the mutual hostage exchange, Duke Zhong remained at the Zhou court as co-regent, and matters remained peaceful for a time. King Ping passed away in the 51st year of his reign. Upon his death, Duke Zhong and Zhou Heijian jointly administered the state. Duke Zhong recalled his son, Crown Prince Hu, back to Zhou, and sent envoys to escort Zhou's Crown Prince Hu back to the capital to ascend the throne. However, Prince Hu, devastated by his father's death and unable to be present in his final days, was overwhelmed by grief. He fell ill soon after his return and died. His own son Lin succeeded him as King Huan. As envoys and nobles from all the vassal states assembled to mourn the late king and pay respects to the new monarch, Duke Ji Fu of Mao arrived early. His every action strictly observed the rites, earning him the admiration of all. Yet King Huan remained haunted by two things. His father had died in Zhou as a political hostage, and Duke Zhong still held sway over the royal court. Suspicious and uneasy, he privately consulted Zhou Heijian. Duke Zhong once held the late crown prince hostage. Surely he disrespects my authority. How can ruler and minister continue in harmony? Minister Mao conducts himself with humility. I wish to divide power and grant Mao co-regency. What are your thoughts? Zhou Gonghajian replied, Duke Zhang is a harsh man, lacking in grace, not a truly loyal subject. But recall, during Zhou's eastern migration to Luyi, Jin and Zheng rendered immense assistance. If you strip Duke Zhang of power the moment your reign begins and place another in control, he will surely rebel in outrage. This move cannot be taken lightly. But King Huan declared resolutely, I will not sit idly by and be ruled from beneath. My mind is made up. The next morning, King Huan held court and said to Duke Zhang of Zheng, You are a faithful minister of my late father. I would not presume to place you among lesser lords. Please be at ease. Duke Zhang replied, I have long wished to resign. Today, I offer my formal departure from office. With clear frustration, he left the court and muttered to those nearby, The young king is faithless, he is not worth serving. That very day, he rode back to Zheng. At the outskirts of the capital, Crown Prince Hu and a host of officials met him, inquiring as to his sudden return. Duke Zhang recounted the king's dismissive words, and all were stirred to indignation. Minister Gao Qumi stepped forward. Our ruler and his father have served the royal house for 2 generations with great merit. Even when the late crown prince was a hostage in our land, we upheld every courtesy. Now the king favors Mao Gong over our lord. It is a grave injustice. Why not raise an army, storm the Zhou court, depose this unworthy monarch, and install a worthy successor instead? Which among the lords does not fear Zheng? We could truly claim hegemony. But Yin Kaosu opposed him. This must not be. The bond between ruler and subject is like that between child and mother. Our Lord could not bear to harm his own mother. How could he turn on his sovereign? Let him endure for another year, then return to court. The Zhou king will surely regret his actions. Let not one moment of anger dishonor the loyal sacrifice of our late duke. Then Minister Ji Zhu said, With respect to both sides, I suggest we strike a balance. Allow me to lead a force to Zhou's borders, claiming poor harvests as the pretext, seeking provisions between one and law. If the Zhou king sends envoys to question us, we are prepared to answer. If no word comes, it will not be too late for our lord to resume his duties. Duke Zhang approved the plan and ordered Ji Zhu to lead a battalion, granting him authority to act according to circumstance. While stationed at the border near one, Ji Zhu proclaimed, Our state has suffered famine and lacks grain. We request 1,000 measures of millet from Minister One. But Wen's steward refused, saying, I have received no command from the king. I cannot grant this. Ji Zhu replied, The barley and wheat are ripe. They can well sustain us. I'll take what I need. Why ask further? He ordered his troops to ready sickles and fan out into the fields. They harvested the grain in full and hauled the bounty away. Ji Zhu himself led elite soldiers to provide support, and Minister One, seeing the strength of the Zheng army, dared not resist. For over 3 months, the Zheng forces remained encamped along the border. Later, they marched toward the lands near the royal capital. By mid-autumn in the 7th month, early rice in the fields was ripe. Ji Zhou instructed his men to disguise themselves as merchants and secretly position carts across the villages. At the third watch of the night, they struck swiftly, harvesting the rice in unison. By dawn, the entire countryside outside Qinzhou was stripped bare. Before the local garrison could react, Zheng troops had long vanished. Reports from both Wen and Qinzhou quickly reached the Zhou court, informing King Huan of the theft of grain by Zheng soldiers. Enraged, the king prepared to raise troops in retaliation. But Zhou Gong Heijian advised, though Ji Zhou stole grain and millet, such incidents are minor border disputes. Duke Zhong may not have even known. To forsake a close relative over a moment of anger would be most unwise. If the Duke feels any unease, he will surely come in person to reconcile. King Huan accepted this counsel. He ordered increased vigilance along the borders, but chose not to pursue the matter further. Thus, the theft of grain, both millet and wheat, was left unpunished. Seeing that King Huan of Zhou expressed no blame or suspicion, Duke Zhong of Zheng grew uneasy. To show goodwill, he resolved to pay formal tribute at court. Just as he was preparing for the journey, word came, an envoy from Qi has arrived. The envoy, bearing a message from Duke Shi of Qi, invited Duke Zhong to meet at Shimen. Eager to strengthen ties with Qi, Duke Zhong accepted. At their meeting, the two rulers swore a blood oath of brotherhood, vowing to aid each other in times of need. During their exchange, the Duke of Qi inquired, "Has your crown prince Hu yet taken a wife?" Duke Zhong replied, "Not yet." Duke Shi then offered, "I have a beloved daughter, though young. She is gifted and wise. If you do not mind the age, I would gladly pledge her to your son." Duke Zhong humbly gave thanks and, upon returning home, relayed the proposal to Crown Prince Wu. But the prince replied, "Marriage is meant to unite equals, hence the word match. Zheng is small, she is great. Such disparity feels improper. I dare not reach so high." Duke Zhong tried to persuade him. The offer came from Qi. "If we become in-laws, we can rely on them in all things. Why turn it down?" But the prince stood firm. "A true man must stand on his own. How can I depend on marriage for strength?" Duke Zhong, pleased by his son's resolve, did not press the matter. Later, a Qi envoy arrived in Zhengyan. Learning of Crown Prince Hu's refusal, returned to inform Duke Xin. He sighed and said, "The Prince of Zheng shows the highest humility. My daughter is still young. We shall revisit the idea another day." A later poet would praise Prince Hu for declining to grasp beyond his station. A marriage must match house to house, status and rank must both be weighed. Let fools with silver chase noble lines. True worth turns from such display. While Duke Zhong of Zheng was in council with his ministers discussing a planned audience at the Zhou court, sudden news arrived. Marquis Huan of Wei had died. Startled, Duke Zhong questioned the envoy closely, and from him learned the shocking truth. Guan Zhong had assassinated his sovereign. Duke Zhong stamped his foot and exclaimed, "Our state shall soon face the flames of war." The ministers asked in alarm, "How does your grace foresee this?" Duke Zhong replied, "Zhou has always harbored a passion for warfare. Now, having seized the throne through regicide, he will surely resort to military might to assert his will. And given the long-standing tension between Zheng and Wei, we shall be the first testing ground for his ambitions. Prepare the defenses at once. While speaking of how Gongzi's Zhuayu came to commit regicide, we must begin with the royal household of Wei. Marquis Zhang of Wei had as his principal wife Lady Zhongzheng, sister of Duke Deshan of Qi's heir apparent. She was renowned for her beauty, though she bore no children. His second consort, Lady Li Gui, daughter of a noble from Chun, was likewise childless. Li Gui's younger sister, Dai Gui, followed her into the Wei palace and bore Marquis Zhang 2 sons, Wan and Jin. Lady Zhongzheng, of gentle temperament and free from jealousy, took Wan as her own son and even offered palace maidens to the Marquis in hopes of producing an heir. One of these maids became pregnant and bore a son named Zhuayu. Zhuayu grew up to be violent, headstrong, and enamored with warfare. The Marquis doted on him and indulged his every whim. Minister Qin Shi once warned, "A parent who truly loves his child instructs him in righteousness and guards him from corruption. Too much favor breeds arrogance, and arrogance gives rise to chaos. If your grace intends to pass the throne to Zhuyu, then name him crown prince at once. If not, it is wise to restrain him before pride and indulgence lead to calamity." But the Marquis dismissed his advice. Qin Shi's own son, Shihou, was a close friend of Zhuayu. They frequently rode out together on hunting excursions, disturbing the countryside with reckless behavior. Disgusted, Qin Shi punished his son with 50 lashes and locked him away in an empty house. Shihou escaped by climbing over the wall and moved in with Zhuyu, eating at his table and never returning home. Qin Shi was helpless to stop him. Eventually, Marquis Zhong passed away. The throne went to his elder son Gongzhuan, who became known as Marquis Huan of Wei. But Huang was meek by nature. Seeing that he was ill-equipped to rule, Qin Shi retired from court. Zhuayu, emboldened, became ever more brazen. Together with Shihou, he began plotting to usurp the throne. At that moment, news arrived of King Feng of Zhou's death, and the new ruler, King Huan, had ascended. Marquis Huan of Wei resolved to travel to Zhou for mourning and congratulations. Shihou seized the chance and said to Zhuayu, "The time is ripe. Tomorrow, when the Marquis leaves for Zhou, hold a farewell banquet at the Western Gate. Post 500 armed men in hiding nearby. After several rounds of wine, draw a dagger from your sleeve and strike him down. If any guards hesitate, execute them on the spot. The seat of a sovereign will then be yours, ripe for the taking." Zhuayu was elated. He secretly ordered Shihou to lead 500 strong men and hide them just outside the Western Gate. Zhuayu personally drove his carriage to escort Marquis Huan to his guest pavilion, where a banquet had already been laid out. Bowing respectfully, Zhuayu offered a cup. "Elder brother, since you're departing on a long journey, I present this humble wine in your honor." Marquis Huan replied, "You trouble yourself, dear brother. I will be gone barely a month. In the meantime, please manage state affairs with care." Zhuayu responded, "Brother may rest assured." Midway through the banquet, Zhu arose, filled a golden goblet, and presented it to the Marquis. Huan drained the cup, then filled one in return and offered it to Zhuayu. Zhuayu extended both hands to receive it, but feigned a slip. he dropped the goblet. Quickly stooping to retrieve it, he insisted on cleaning it himself. Marquis Huan suspected nothing and called for another cup to be refilled so he might try again. At that moment, Zhao Yu sprang to his feet, rushed behind Huan, and drew a short sword from his robes. He stabbed him from behind, the blade piercing straight through the chest. It was the 3rd month, on the day Wuxian, in the 1st year of King Huan of Zhou's reign. The ministers accompanying Huan, well aware of Zhou's martial prowess and now surrounded by Shihuo's 500 armored men, knew resistance was futile. They surrendered. Huan's corpse was placed in an empty cart and, under the pretense of sudden illness, quietly sent for burial. Zhao Yu then seized power and declared himself ruler, appointing Shihuo as Grand Minister. Marquis Huan's younger brother, Jin, fled to the state of Qing. A court historian would later lament the tragedy that befell Wei. A son must be raised with righteous guidance. Spoiled pride breeds downfall unspoken. Just 3 days after seizing the throne, Zhao Yu found unrest brewing. Rumors of his fratricide were spreading far and wide. To quell domestic dissent and project power abroad, he summoned his chief minister, Shihuo, for counsel. I must establish fear among neighboring states to intimidate the people and secure my rule, Zhao Yu declared. Which state should we strike first? Shihuo replied, most neighbors bear us no grudge except Zhang. Years ago, Zhang attacked us under the pretense of suppressing Gongsun Hua's rebellion. Our late marquis submitted and sued for peace. That humiliation is our nation's deepest shame. If your grace seeks a target, none suits better than Zhang. But Qi and Zhang are bound by a blood oath at Shimen, Zhao Yu countered. They stand allied. If Wei invades, Qi will certainly intervene. How can one state withstand the armies of two? Shihuo answered confidently, of all foreign lineage states, only Song still honors your grace with the rank of duke. Among kinship states, Lu reveres you as their uncle. If you wish to strike Zhang, then dispatch envoys to Song and Lu, securing their support in arms. Add the minor states of Chen and Cai, who are loyal to the royal house, especially now that tensions fester between Zheng and Zhou. Those two will surely respond if called. With 5 states united, what fear have we of Zheng or Qi? Zhao Yu hesitated, but Song and Lu are great states. Can we compel them so easily? You see only one side of the board, said Shihuo. Listen closely. Years ago, Duke Mu of Song inherited the throne from his brother Shen. In gratitude, he passed over his own son Feng and instead chose his nephew Yi as heir. Feng, enraged, fled to Zheng. The Duke of Zheng took him in and long wished to help him reclaim the Song throne. Now, if we provoke Zheng, Feng will leap at the chance to avenge himself. As for Lu, it is Gong Zicui who truly controls the government. With command of the army and contempt for his sovereign, he is a power unto himself. Offer him generous gifts, and Lu's troops will march without hesitation. Zhao Yu, greatly pleased, dispatched envoys at once to Lu, Chen, and Cai. Yet he hesitated over whom to send to Song. Shihuo recommended a man named Ningxi, a native of Zhongmu. He is quick-witted and eloquent, he said. He would be perfect for the mission. Zhao Yu agreed and ordered Ningxi to request aid from Song. When he arrived, Duke Zhang of Song asked, "What grievance do you hold that warrants war against Zheng?" Qin Shi replied, "The Duke of Zheng is a tyrant. He executed his brother and imprisoned his own mother. When Gongsun Hua fled to our land, Zheng dared not tolerate it and raised arms against us. Our late Marquis, daunted by Sheng's might, surrendered in disgrace. Now, our present Lord seeks to avenge that shame. If great states like yours join us in righteous cause, the wrongs of yesterday may be redressed today." Duke Zhang frowned. "My state has no quarrel with Zheng. Is it not excessive to call it a common enemy?" Qin Shi bowed and said, "May I speak plainly, if we dismiss the attendants?" The Duke nodded, ordering all to withdraw. Turning toward him, Qin Shi continued, "May I ask, from whom did your grace inherit your title?" "From my uncle, Duke Mu," the Duke replied. "Succession by blood," said Qin Shi, "is the law of the ancients. Though Duke Mu ruled with sage virtue, his own son Feng resents losing his birthright. Now living in neighboring Zheng, Feng has never let go of his claim. If one day Zheng rallies troops in his name, your people, grateful to Duke Mu, might turn in his favor. Trouble will rise within and without. Thus, though we call this a war against Zheng, in truth, it is a way to eliminate your deepest peril. Should you lead the charge, Wei will commit its full strength, and Lu, Chen, and Tai shall follow. The fall of Zheng would be but a matter of time." These words struck at the very fear Duke Zhang had long harbored. He agreed to raise arms, yet not all were silent. Kang Fujia, Grand Marshal of Song and descendant of the Qing Dynasty's founding king, stood and rebuked the decision. This way envoy must not be heeded. If the Duke of Zheng deserves condemnation for striking his brother and imprisoning his mother, does Huayu, who murdered his elder brother and usurped the throne, not deserve even greater blame? I implore your grace to reconsider." But Duke Zhang had already pledged support to Qin Shi and dismissed the council. A date was soon set for war. Gong Zicui of Lu, having accepted a lavish bribe from Wei, disregarded the authority of Duquin and raised a massive army to join the campaign. Chen and Cai, arriving as promised, required no further urging. Among the assembled states, Duke Zhang of Song, by virtue of his noble rank, was recognized as the coalition leader. Wei appointed Shruho as vanguard commander, while Zhuayu himself commanded the rear guard, overseeing logistics and supplying abundant provisions to reward the allied troops. Altogether, the 5 states mustered each in several war chariots, surrounding Qing's eastern gate so tightly not a drop of water could pass through. Duke Zhong gathered his ministers and asked for counsel, but the court was divided between those urging war and those favoring peace. With a calm smile, he declared, "None of these are sound plans. Zhuayu has just seized the throne through usurpation and lacks popular support. He stirs up old grudges and borrows the strength of 4 states not to settle scores, but to establish fear and awe. Lu's Gongzitsui has taken Wei's bribes and ignores his own duke. Chen and Tai have no true quarrel with us, they lack reason to fight. Only Song, fearing Gong Zifeng's presence here, is earnest in its aggression. So, let Feng be relocated to Chang'e. Song will surely shift its forces. Then Zifeng shall take 500 troops and sortie alone from the Eastern Gate, openly provoking Wei in feigning defeat. That will satisfy Zhu's desire for victory. Since his grip on Wei is still fragile, he won't linger long in camp. Moreover, I've heard Wei's minister Sri Shi is a man of great loyalty. Internal unrest in Wei is inevitable. Zhou won't have the strength to threaten us. He dispatched Minister Xia Xuing with a unit to escort Gongzi Feng to Chang'e and sent word to Song. Feng, though once your subject, sought shelter in our land. We could not bear to punish him. He now awaits your judgment in Chang'e. Do as you see fit. True to expectation, Duke Song of Song redirected his troops to surround Chang'e. Seeing this, the armies of Tai, Chun, and Lu wavered. None had deep cause for war, and they now contemplated withdrawal. Just then came news. Gongzi had marched from Zheng's Eastern Gate, engaging Wei forces alone, pretending to be driven back. The three observing allies watched from their ramparts, arms folded, unmoved. When Shriho led his troops into battle against Gongzi, they barely exchanged a few passes before Lu turned and fled, dragging his halberd behind him in feigned panic. Shriho gave chase to the Eastern Gate, but Lu's men swiftly opened it from within, pulling him to safety. To reward his soldiers for their efforts and maintain morale, Shriho ordered them to harvest all the ripe grain outside the gate, then instructed the army to begin withdrawing. When Zhao heard this, he questioned, "We've yet to achieve a clear victory. Why retreat so soon?" Shriho dismissed the attendants and revealed his reasoning in private. Upon hearing it, Zhou was delighted.